The Entrepreneur MBA podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I am co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is a leading provider of lines of credit to small businesses. Our line of credit program is fast, easy, inexpensive, and costs nothing to set up, making it a great cash backup plan for your business. If you'd like to learn more about our line of credit program, please visit us at fscreditline.com. That's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com, or give us a call at 862-207-4118. Just remember, the time to set up a credit line is before you need it, so that when you do need it, it's there ready to go. Today, I am excited to be speaking with Ty Belknap from Port Bell SEO. Ty has been an online business owner for almost 20 years now and has gone from being a solopreneur, online marketer, to running a 4-person remote SEO business. His closest employee is over 4,000 miles away. His latest book, Timeless SEO Secrets, which is in his 3rd edition, is written for people that don't know SEO, which is really perfect for entrepreneurs, to be honest. Ty, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
Hey, Stephen, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. So today's topic is called Managing Your Employees. Know what your employees are doing. And so it's a message that when I think we first discussed or kind of traded emails about what topic we would be talking about, I was a little taken back. Because when you're growing a business of scale, right, you really, you don't want to really be watching what your employees are doing, right? I mean, you maybe want to look at their measurements, you want to their KPIs, you maybe see some other things, but I get what you're saying, and I thought it was a really good topic for us to discuss, because I thought that when you're smaller, I think that I learned personally too that it makes sense to know more about what your staff is doing. And it depends on the industry that you're in as well. So
that's true.
when you thought about this topic and know what your employees are doing, tell me a little bit about your thought process.
Well, and it wasn't about, know every single thing that they're doing every minute of the day. And, if they make one mistake in coding, if they're an SEO expert, that you would know what that one mistake is. It's knowing enough, if you'll excuse my language, to know that they're not BSing you. It's knowing enough to know that they're doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And of course, as you get bigger, then you hire a manager that would be responsible for that. But, until you get probably 10, 15, maybe 20 employees, you're probably not going to be at a point where you have a manager, especially with technical people, because there's so many people out today that will say, hey, I can do this. Like I work with a lot of freelancers, and a freelancer will tell you they can do anything in the world. They can't, but they'll tell you they can because they want the money. Yeah. And so you got to be careful with who you hire and making sure that they are doing the work that they say they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, listen, I think I'm in the minority, and that is, although I've built 6 companies, I'm not a control freak.
Okay.
So I don't, and I think that 90% of entrepreneurs that are smaller, let's say under $6-7 million in revenue, I think that it seems that they are control freaks.
Okay.
And it's a problem. It's a problem. I think once you reach a certain size, that becomes a hindrance to your growth.
Interesting.
But I think when you're smaller, I think I've made mistakes a lot in the past where I didn't really understand my employees' jobs
Hmm.
and what they were doing, and I got snowed.
Yeah.
And I think, I think I'm in the opposite. I think with my companies were smaller, I think I should know more of what my employees were doing. So I think you are right. And I know I know a lot about your industry. Now, let's be clear. The Ty is in the SEO business, search engine optimization. So for those listeners who don't know that term, it's when you get onto the Google pages without having, in essence, to pay. It's, in essence, right?
Without doing the paid ads. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I'll share an experience with you, Ty. Like I really been into SEO for 15 or more years.
Mm-hmm.
And over those 15, and from those 14 of those years, much more of a layman's perspective. I could kind of listen and talk to my SEO consultants and understand what they're trying to do, but I couldn't really say, wait a minute, what are we doing here with this link building? You didn't even mention that, right? I wasn't conversant enough. And then within the last year over COVID, I made it a mission to become really, really technical in SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, did I find so many mistakes that our consultants were doing, and I, got rid of them. Yeah. Right. And now I'm, kind of really doing it myself, or, delegating and really making sure I follow through. Yeah. And now I look at it and I say, oh my God, I just spent so much money and wasted so much. We didn't get the results we could have gotten. Yeah. Because I wasn't on top of things. So do you feel the same way?
Oh yeah. 70% of our clients are people that have had a bad experience with an SEO person in the past. And so that's the main reason why I even came up with this topic. But not even that, I'm a technical person, but don't ask me to add numbers. I can't. Don't even go to 2 + 2. I can mess that up half the time. So I don't know accounting at all. And when I first started my business, I hired an accountant, and he was doing all the work, and I gave everything to him. That's what he told me I needed to do, and I trusted him. And about a year in, I went to his office. I said, hey, I don't understand something that's going on, because even though money was coming in, I didn't seem to have any. And he said, well, let me gather everything together for you. Come back tomorrow and we'll go over everything. I said, great. Came back the next day. His office was completely empty and he was gone.
Wow.
And if I would have actually looked at how the accounting was going, I would have spotted that immediately. But I knew nothing about it. So what I did then was I took one quick accounting course just so I could know the basics. And now I can at least know enough with the accountants that I have, where I trust what they're doing. It's kind of like, who was it, Teddy Roosevelt, that said, trust but verify?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my motto now. It's trust but verify.
Yeah. So how, that you could really get into the weeds, really really having to know everything. With your own company, how much at what point do you say, you know what, that's getting a little bit too detail oriented. I don't need to know that.
I try to learn enough to understand the basics. Like part of the reason why I run a marketing company today, when I first started in 1995, I was just doing web design, and there was no such thing as online marketing then. It was brand new. And I realized you could design the best website in the world, but it wouldn't matter if nobody went to it. And I realized that I needed to learn marketing. And at the same time, I realized I even needed to learn marketing. And you got to learn marketing if you want your business to grow. You either learn it yourself or hire someone to do it. And so, you need to know at least a little bit. And the funny thing is, it was learning about the marketing. I realized that I loved marketing more than I liked doing the web design part of it. And so as my business grew, I hired web designers. I got out of that part of it, and I got into the SEO and the marketing part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what have you found about do you have any processes and procedures of what you do to check up on your employees to make sure that, they're doing what they say they're doing,
Mhm.
or are you just really measuring them on the results, or do you know so much about your field that you can actually look through their code or look through the work that they're doing and know that it's good or not?
At this point, well, for me personally, I've been doing SEO for so long that I run the SEO part of the business. But like for my web designer, we meet even though he's more than 4,000 miles away. He actually is so far away. He's a 12-hour time difference. So that in itself is kind of difficult sometimes, but we try to meet at least once a week just to go over what's been going on, what he's been doing, what he's been working on. And I will occasionally go and check on something just to make sure. Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. And so it never hurts to have a second set of eyes. I don't get mad at him if he misses something. I just remind him to do those things. But if I didn't know anything about web design at all, I wouldn't know what to look for. I wouldn't know, just to make sure, because like one of the biggest things with web design, and this is huge today, is that you can have one error on the back end of your website that is called a fatal error. And if that's there, Google won't rank your website at all. Or it might rank your website a little bit, but not much. And no amount of SEO, no amount of online marketing you do will help at all if that error is there. And so you got to know, you should know things, at least how to look for it, things like that. And of course, it's different for different businesses. Like even in the real estate business, you've got appraisers, you've got mortgage people. There's so many people that got to come together. And I would guess that you need to know at least a little bit about each of those, just so you know that they're doing the job they're supposed to be doing as well.
What about when you're working with your staff? I mean, how long you have? What about as a consultant? When you're working with outside consultants, do you manage them the same way you think you manage your employees?
Yeah, because actually every employee I have starts as a freelancer. So they pretty much start as an outside consultant. So I hire them on a per job basis. If they do well enough for 6 months to a year on a job to job basis, then I hire them as a part-time employee. Then if they do well enough as that, I hire them as a full-time employee. So I start every person that works for me starts as an outside consultant.
So let's take an example. And I think it doesn't matter if it's an employee or a consultant, but you have somebody, like, let's face it, all the people that you have, they're working a certain amount of hours and they're working on these projects, and you really don't know, you're experienced enough where you kind of know how long it should take to do something, I guess.
Yeah.
But then you get into some coding problems, some other issues. SEO isn't a lot of coding, but how do you really know, like, that somebody is, billing you for time when, when it should have taken 10 hours and it took 20. And I'm not saying that the person, this is the harder example. Let's forget that the idea of someone ripping you off. Right. I don't think it happens that much. What I do think is someone who's not that good at their job.
Right.
And they have to learn something for the first time. They have to learn, and you're paying them for it. I had an SEO consultant like that where I didn't know, he didn't know a lot about SEO, and he was portraying himself, and he was coming in kind of a new, and he gave me a much cheaper price, but it took me a couple of months to figure out, wow, this guy is really new at this.
Yeah.
So what do you do in those situations?
Well, let me ask you. So basically, it's in a situation where someone's billing you for time, and you don't know for sure whether or not they're actually spending that amount of time. Is that the base question there?
Yeah, or it should have taken. I think it's more about it should have taken less time than what they billed you for.
Yeah, and I've actually seen that myself quite often. which is why I've gone through so many freelancers. I've probably hired 30 or 40 different freelancers in the time that I've been doing this. And I see it a lot when especially whenever you first hire somebody, they're always going to do the absolute best that they can do, or at least it seems like they are. And then about maybe a month or two down the road, they get a little bit slower. And then a month or two later, they get even slower. But they're still billing, they're actually billing you more and more for pretty much the same work that they did in the beginning. Or sometimes they'll just bill you. Like, I had a person I hired and they billed me 5 hours to design a logo. Now, logo design is very creative. So it can take a little bit of extra time sometimes. But to build two concepts of a logo, even with the creative part of it, shouldn't take more than an hour to an hour and a half. And I've had a good 15, probably 20 freelancers design logos for me that have taken that. So when I have someone say, it took me 5 hours, I know now that it's taking too long. And a lot of it, you really got to trust your gut too, because if they come back with something and they say it took a long time because, and I'll pick on web design because web design is a good example of it. There's a lot of coding in web design, and so they could say, it took me 15 hours to design this website because there was extra coding. You can come back and you can say, what extra coding was that? And if they start doing the technobabble stuff, just stop them and say, we need to talk about this in English. Please explain to me in English why it took that extra time. I don't think that's a problem because you're the one who's paying them for the work. And so they should be able to explain themselves in a way that makes sense. And if there's no way they can do it to where it makes sense, then it could be because they're trying to baffle you.
Yeah, I guess you're in favor of the idea that when you hire a freelancer, that you should get a quote from them about how long the job's going to take. I guess that way up front, right? You say someone says this is going to take you 20 hours, and you're expecting it to be 5 hours. You're like, whoa, wait a minute here, my web designer, one thing I really, really like about them, and I've been with them a long time. Longer than most web designers. I've gone through a number. I think I've been with them for 10 years now. So,
that's good.
That's a long time. But the thing I like about them is they use Clockify. And so it actually shows you exactly by the minutes where they put their time. Now, granted, they're putting it in, but I like to see, because what I'm really surprised, sometimes they'll get constant work through me throughout the month. And a lot of times it's like fixes or improvements to the website that I want.
Yeah.
And then I'll send something up to them and they'll say, this fix that you wanted took 4 hours. And I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't have, if I knew it was going to take 4 hours, I wouldn't have asked for it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is a different relationship where I can't. Now, what I do with them, if I think a project's big, I will go back to them and I'll say, quote me the amount of hours you think this is going to take, because I want to decide if I'm going to do it or not, or if I'm going to make it simpler to reduce the costs that are involved. Now, I really like the software they use. Now, what's interesting is I was using a SEO consulting company in 2020, and I asked them if they could show me if they could use something like Shopify. And they basically stopped working with me because of that. Yeah. And I think they thought I was going to be too hard of a client.
That could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some different things there too, because like with the SEO that we do, we charge a monthly fee, but it's not necessarily based on the number of hours. Because 1 month, like let's say we have someone that does our middle of the road, which would normally take, let's say, 2 or 3 hours a week. Okay. Or that's actually kind of a smaller one, but we'll say 2 or 3 hours a week. Well, 1 week we might spend, like there was just recently, Google did 2 updates. And when they do updates, sometimes there's major changes that need to be done. So we might spend 10 or 12 hours that week, which means we may only spend an hour or two for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just monitoring it and making sure that it's still doing what it's supposed to be doing. So even though it might be based off of, let's say, 3 or 4 hours a week, that doesn't mean that every single week it's going to be exactly that amount of time.
Yeah. So let's take some examples. I think you might, if you go into an area where you don't know much about it and you feel like you're getting snowed, I guess what you're saying is you kind of learn a little, your antenna goes up. You kind of say, you know what, I need to learn a little bit more about this area, just enough. So I know I'm not getting snowed. I mean, the biggest problem, listen, I have a business partner, right? And he's very hands-on, very technical in on a whole bunch of different areas.
Right.
And I'm kind of like the big picture guy.
Okay.
And so for me, like getting into the weeds, I one, don't enjoy it. And number two is, okay, so my costs are up 10%. All right. Yeah. But my revenue's up, 100%.
Right.
So, I don't know. I think I think it depends on the person you are, but listen, I think me personally, I think I should be in the weeds more. I think my business partner should be less.
And there is that give and take. Well, and even like what I said with my business, we don't necessarily track every single hour, but my goal is like we do an agreement on keywords, which isn't the best metric, but it's an easy one. It's an easy one to show. So every month I can show my clients that they're getting higher in the search engines for the keywords that they want. Because especially with SEO, your first 6 or 8 months, especially with a brand new website, you may not be anywhere near page 1, not especially if it's competitive keywords. It can take a lot more time. And in the beginning, you don't see a lot of traction, but whoever you hire for whatever reason, even if it does take time, they should be able to have some way of showing you that something is moving, that it's getting closer to the goal. And I think if they can't show you that on a consistent basis, that's when you should really take a second look at what they're doing.
Yeah, that's my impression too. Like my instinct is to hold people to KPIs, key performance indicators, right? Yeah. And that is, okay, let's all agree on what we're going to see next month as improvement, or 3 months from now. And let's all agree that this is what we're going to say. And because I think you need to, it's pick the right KPIs, definitely.
Right.
If you have SEO is just full of, the shiny white object, where you're like, getting visits to your site, okay, great. But if they don't convert, then what good is it? Right. So, I've learned that over the years, you forget about all this other stuff, and I can go right down the line with all the other stuff that you can measure. But, but if, like in my case, if people aren't filling out loan applications,
right,
then my SEO is not working. Right. So that's, what our number one thing is, who's becoming a client. Right. Number two is how many applications are we filling out that are quality? Number three is maybe visits to our website through organic searches. So, there's all this criteria. And if I don't see, the amount of clients that I have going up, over a period of time, then I know we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It has nothing to do with how many people find you. It has everything to do with how many of them are actually going to hire you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, having that conversation with the consultant, with your employee, I think you can avoid some of the having to go into the weeds if you are talking the language of the KPI. Although I do agree with you, the thing that I've learned, and I think, the SEO is a great example, is, it's such, for my organization, for my company, it's such an important part of our operation that I cannot not be in the weeds on this, because it's the difference between us being successful or not. Yeah. So, I really have to know a lot about it. Yeah. Do you find that with yourself, that you are a control freak in general?
Actually, I have had to learn to be more of one. I'm very hands off.
Oh,
I have a habit of, like my current employee, he has to remind me each week for us to meet. I don't
oh,
remind him.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so I I am so hands off. That's why the accountant was able to snow me over and take all my money, because I'm so very hands off. And when I was younger, of course, I was nervous about trying to hold people accountable. And it took me a while to realize, well, I'm the one paying them. They shouldn't be telling me what we're doing. I should be telling them what we're doing. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten more cranky about it. And so, I hold people more accountable now. But no, I've actually had to learn to be less hands off than I am, because I've
yeah.
been the kind of person where I'll hire you. I'll say, here, this is what I want done. Go do it. Let me know. Let's say, you can have it done in 4 days. Okay, I'll see you in 4 days. And then in 4 days, it's not done. And I've got to say, okay, well, why isn't it done when we agreed on 4 days? They said, well, we need four more days, where I could have been tracking them a little bit better, and, and making sure that they're actually doing the work that they should do. So I've had to learn that.
Well, let's face it. Listen, I think I think you're not going to be very successful if you micromanage things big time. Like someone told you, this is going to take, 8 hours, and, they asked you for another hour, and this always happens, and you're pissed off on a constant basis. I honestly don't know how you're going to be a successful business person. Might be
8 hours, I understand, but let's say, let's pick on a website. A website, if you have all the information, you can design it in 10 to 12 hours, but you're not going to spend 10 to 12 hours in one day doing it. So let's figure that 10 to 12 hours over a week. But that doesn't mean at the beginning of the week you say, go for it. And a week later you say, how is it? Maybe 3 or 4 days later, send them a quick note. How's it going? Having any problems, and that way you can get a feel of how they're doing, and you never know. They can come back and they say, well, I got sick, I caught a cold or something. It's going to take me a couple extra days. No problem at all. Now we've communicated and we know what's going on, rather than the 7 days is now up. The client is expecting the website. We don't have it for them, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
So to me, there's it's not micromanaging, but it's managing enough to make sure that things are flowing smoothly.
All right. Anything else that you would like to add to the idea of knowing what your employees are doing?
The big thing is, and this is the tough thing, is if you have an employee that just consistently isn't doing things the way that you want. If I call it freeing up their future, find someone else.
Yeah.
Because I had one of my first employees was just the nicest person in the world, but they never did anything on time. It was always late. Even the simplest thing was always late. And I realized they had zero time management skills. And I tried to help them with time management skills. I did all this stuff, and it drug my business down because I was very small then. It was just me and that person. So I had to fill up the slack. I was doing all my work, and I was doing half of their work as well, and still paying them. And so I say, someone told me once, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tough because you don't want to fire, especially if they're nice. You don't want to fire them, but if they're not doing the work they're supposed to be doing, you got to free up their future. So.
Yeah, I think if you always handle it professionally. I don't mean about firing someone professionally. I mean about it's like going through the steps. Okay, I started my career working for Xerox for 8.5 years, and things were always done professionally. Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, there aren't a lot of entrepreneurs that I find that actually worked in the corporate world. They actually a lot of times just went right into entrepreneurship, right? Yeah. And with Xerox, if you weren't doing well, you had a performance meeting with your manager, and everything was documented. An action plan was put in place. you were given time to kind of rectify the situation. KPIs were put in place. And then after that, you would have you would know exactly when you would have your next review to see if those improvements were made. Now, that doesn't mean the manager came over to me and started showing me everything that I needed to do differently.
Yeah.
It was like, this is where your shortfall is. This is what we're talking about as far as your plan and what you think you're going to do. If it's not done by this time, then we're going to, have to maybe potentially let you go. But there was no surprises.
Yeah.
Right. It was no, and that's the way I think that good managing of people is that you don't just walk in one day and like, oh, you're gone. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think, when I first started, 25 years ago in my first business, God, I was a terrible manager. I was terrible at it. And I really had to work on being a better manager. And, and I took courses and I read books and I did everything I could and I became a better manager. Not a great manager, but a better manager. Yeah. And, I don't know if you feel the same way, like you got better as you went along.
Oh, and I did the same thing. I started reading books about it. In fact, some of the books behind me are specifically on management and leadership. And I even went to school on leadership because I believe the best managers are leaders. Yeah. And so I did a lot of training on leadership myself because I realized I knew nothing about that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think management isn't just a role that you go into. It's something that you need to learn how to do. I don't know. I think very few people are natural managers. And even if you are a natural manager, you can always learn more.
Yeah, I think it's easier to become I don't think it's natural to become a manager. I think it is more natural to be a leader. But that doesn't mean that leadership is born. That's something that needs to be learned and you can learn it and be better at it. Maybe it's just me. I find, so one of the things I had taken Dale, it just shows you how old I am. Dale Carnegie classes, right? Which was very, very common, and I took Dale Carnegie classes and on managing people. It was a great class, just really great. And, I think one of the things they taught us was that there are leaders, there are managers, and there's worker bees, right? And it's very hard for any person to be in those categories at the same time. And so it's hard for a worker manager to be a leader. It's hard for a leader to be a worker bee. You don't want that either. And so, the thing is I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, they might be stronger in the leadership side, and then they're just terrible as managers because of that. And when you're running a small business, right, you don't always have a second in command, right? So it's challenging. I know one of the things I had done early on, I said, I brought on a second in command to be the manager of my staff because I knew I wasn't that good at it. And that helped. So,
I agree. And that's really smart because you recognize that wasn't one of your strengths. And I've never liked these things that say, where you do these tests and you find out what your weaknesses are and they teach you how to, overcome your weaknesses. Hire your weaknesses out. Work on your strengths. If I'm like my accounting skills or if they're a 1, if I work really hard at accounting, I might be able to get it to a 3 or a 4. I'm going to hate it because I don't like numbers in the first place. Where I could take that time and do something else that's maybe a 5 or a 6 now, make it a 7 or an 8, and hire someone else to do the accounting part of it.
Yeah. I a long time ago, I read this really great book, and it was called "Now Discover Your Strengths," and it was written by the Gallup organization, and basically they studied 15,000 executives, and they basically saw that people who are very successful did what came natural to them, and the other things that they were not good at, they delegated it out to somebody else.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
So and I'll share with our listeners one of the things that I came up with. I had this one company, Healthcare Seeker. We had gone from 1 million to 3 million to 5 million to 7 million in revenue. We were on track to do 11 million, and then the 2008 recession hit and went back the other way. But I didn't have at 3 million. I didn't have enough money, I felt, for a really good operations manager and staff manager. And so what I did was I took my one of my top people and I made them a team captain. And I paid her an extra $10,000 a year. And she was very good at, managing, everything that was going on in the office, plus doing her own job. And, she loved the extra money. She knew that as the company grew, she would move into that role more full time. And when I was out of the office, when I was, on vacation or whatever, she was great. I didn't have to worry about anything. And she stayed with me for 12 years, by the way. So
that's a great
in
employee.
Companies. Yeah, she was great. And I she's not with me now, but that's only because I kind of don't need her anymore. But that was a way for me to get away from this idea of like, okay, spending $70,000, $100,000 to bring on a full-time staff, manager, and just bridge the gap a little bit. And I know like everybody who runs a business, smaller wants to have that type of person. Yeah. Right. And
that's tough to find.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So that's really all the time we have today. So I would like to thank so very much Ty Belknap from Port Bell SEO for coming on to today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. Ty, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about reaching you?
Go right to my website. Go to portbell.com. There's links to my books right there on the front page. I've got a video if you're interested in more about what SEO is right on the front page. There's a contact us button right there. I try to make it really easy.
Very good. To our listeners, I just, if you're interested, I tweet daily about new business ideas and lessons that I've learned in business at S Halasnik. That's my name, SHALASNIK. And I want to thank everybody for listening today. Everybody try to get outside, enjoy the nice weather. We all deserve it, unless you're in Seattle where Ty is, where it's 100 degrees in Seattle, which is crazy. But everybody have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Steve.